And welcome back to our week 2 coverage of the World Cup of Pokemon VGC, hosted by Victory Road, sponsored by Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafy. My name is Jamie Boyt, and I am going to be joined for the first time by Stefan Mott. How's it going, Stefan?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm looking forward to getting into some games. We're going to be seeing a pretty fun one today. As one of the representatives of last year's small team that kind of took names, I'm excited to cast another small team that is in the process of taking some names.
Yeah, it seems so. Luxembourg were able to win their first week against Finland, so a very good showing there. And they're going to be going up against Chile this week, so this is going to be a very interesting match that we are going to be featuring going forward for this one. And we've seen the sneak preview of the teams. Going to be some very tried and true Pokemon coming out for this one, but still going to be an exciting game nonetheless.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be awesome. Chile, of course, one of those teams that last year did really well. They got to the top 16. They eventually lost 4-3 to Spain, who won the entire tournament. So, one little bit of RNG, maybe going a little differently in that round of 16 match could have changed the entire course of the World Cup. But as it stands, Chile looking to repeat that performance at the very least, definitely wanting to make it out of this first group. But they did suffer a little bit of a setback in week number 1, drawing with another pretty strong team, the Philippines.
Yeah, so it's still absolutely all to play for in this group at the moment, and we can hop over to see how the players are doing at the moment, see some of their accomplishments coming out for them. So we can see here, Chile are going to be going up against Luxembourg. We have Heriberto Pacaje versus Vincent Wierzbinski. We can see that Vincent is a little bit of a newer player, still yet to get some accomplishments behind their belts. But we've got Heriberto coming out here with some special event championships behind his belt. So a very, very strong player coming out here.
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of really, really impressive results over in the Latin American scene. And, we in Europe and North America, sometimes people forget just how vibrant and how strong the Latin American scene is. So winning those special events in a region where they just have a lot more depth than I think sometimes people give them credit for. Very, very, very impressive results there. And it's going to be interesting to see if Vincent, the upstart, can make a name for himself by winning this set. It's going to be a tough one. I think this is really one of those matches where the roles are pretty set in stone. We've got a favorite, we've got an underdog, but it's Pokemon, and one of the things that we love about VGC is that anything can happen.
Absolutely. And if you've got such a consistent team behind you in that Rinja Sun, then you can probably have a matchup against any kind of teams that are coming out. But it's going to be very, very similar teams coming out. Heriberto has changed up that Grimmsnarl and Charizard to a Rotom Heat and a Thundurus instead. So it's going to be very interesting picks coming out here. Rotom Heat does tend to do a little bit better against the opposing Charizard than your own one would, because it does resist the attacks coming out. It's only super effective with the Rock-type Ancient Powers that come out rather than the 4 times. And potentially going to be that Prankster Thundurus taking over the role of the Grimmsnarl, but could very easily still be that Defiant one.
We've also seen a little bit more hybridization coming in the Thundurus recently. We've seen players running Eerie Impulse, running Taunt, but maintaining that Defiant ability and a couple of offensive physical moves. So something like that could be really, really strong on a team like this as well, allowing the Thundurus to still scare away the opposing Intimidators from those big physical attackers in Zacian and Groudon, still maintaining access to some of those more powerful Prankster moves.
Yeah, it has been interesting seeing the development of the Thundurus over the format. Very much started off as just Defiant Assault Vest, and that was it. And then Assault Vest has kind of dropped off completely. And we are, like you said, seeing all those hybrids. We're seeing a lot of Life Orbs coming out. We are seeing a lot more Prankster Thundurus coming out as well with the support. So it's been very, very interesting to see across the course of this Series 12. It has been able to develop very well. But we are seeing still some Rinja Sun coming out even now, and we're seeing the Groudon with the Grimmsnarl coming out for Vincent's side, and there's the Incineroar and the Rotom Heat coming out for Heriberto.
One of the things that's always interesting to me when I'm watching a Rinja Sun this late in the format is that a lot of people who are still running this team have changed a couple of major things, like I played against a Rinja Sun the other day that had a Citrus Groudon, and the entire purpose of the team was built around Assault Vest earlier on in the format. Like, people are really playing around with the items, the sets, and things, so even if you're playing against a Rinja Sun, you know what your lines into Rinja Sun are, but you don't necessarily know what every piece of that puzzle looks like.
Yeah, it's an incredibly flexible team that allows you to personalize it to yourselves. We've seen the Reflect coming out from the opposing Grimmsnarl. That is a reasonably common move that we do see on the Grimmsnarls there. A nasty plot. The Rotom is faster than the opposing Groudon. It is going to be able to set itself up to +2 special attack here with that nasty plot. And the Groudon didn't go for any kind of rock moves. It opted for the Precipice Blades, which the Rotom Heat is immune to, thanks to that Levitate. But the Incineroar is going to be taking a very, very nice chunk of damage with that Precipice Blade. And Taunt coming out from the Incineroar. So a move that doesn't tend to often fit onto the opposing Incineroar's moveset, but going to be very nice in shutting down that Frantic Grimmsnarl.
Going to be really interesting to see how effective this Nasty Plot Rotom is. Nasty Plot Rotoms were really very big staples of the metas for a lot of 2020, a lot of 2021, but when you add in double restricteds, that's a lot of offensive bulk, but still really solid bulk that the Rotom, with its kind of middling special attack stat, does still struggle to get through, even with a setup. But it's going to be really interesting to see. You know, +2 on any attacking Pokemon is really, really scary. And even with screens, even with the opportunities to maybe reduce some of that damage, +2 Rotom is probably going to do quite a lot here. It won't quite pick it up, though.
And you couldn't set the light screen either because you were taunted by the opposing Incineroar, opting for the Reflect instead. And I'm going to be reducing the defensive capabilities there. Foul Play is going to come out from the opposing Grimmsnarl into the Rotom for just a little bit of chip. And a Precipice Blade's going into a Flying-type Pokemon, and a Levitator is not going to do any damage at all.
Yeah, Heriberto is getting himself into a really, really good spot early on. This is going to be a very, very pivotal turn. You know, does he manage to pick off the Groudon with a double? If the Groudon stays on the field and does Dynamax, maybe the Groudon goes for a Dynamax and lands a Rock Fall on one of these Pokemon, which is a big threat. You know, the Groudon does have a lot of attack and does have access to rock moves usually. So on the one hand, the Groudon's probably pretty comfortable right here. But this is a turn where Heriberto could sort of start to snowball. If he gets things like Airstream boosts onto an already buffed up Rotom, that's going to be really scary as well. So big moment here. Vincent, I would put a lot of money on the fact that he's going to be Dynamaxing the Groudon and not the almost dead Grimmsnarl. But we'll see what Heriberto goes for here.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing the Groudon Dynamax before any of Heriberto's Pokemon, because they would assumedly be fast. We've seen the Rotoms already. Thundurus almost certainly would be, so no Dynamax coming out for Heriberto's side of the field. Instead, just going for the Break to break that Reflect on the Grimmsnarl, breaking that screen and picking up a KO on that very low HP Grimmsnarl as well. The most effective you can be with the Break coming out. Overheat with +2 in the sun is going to do a very, very nice chunk of damage to that Groudon. It would have picked up the KO on the Groudon if it would have stayed regular, but that's a Max Quake against the opposing Thundurus and Rotom, and there was no Incineroar switch in or anything. That's got to be a prediction. It's predicting the Incineroar coming in, but nope. Both Pokemon are still off the ground here.
Yeah, not exactly what I was picturing from Heriberto's side when I talked about snowballing the game, but regardless, the game does look to be snowballing a little bit here. The first turn of Dynamax doesn't accomplish anything, while the Rotom does lose its boosts. That's kind of nice. It's still going to be really difficult to remove from the field here. It's going to be moving before the opposing Groudon, so the Zacian is not going to be able to do much of anything, and even without the boosts, Overheat in the Sun should get rid of that Zacian, so Vincent is kind of forced to protect that, maybe drop a substitute, or switch it out, or risk losing the Zacian.
Yeah, very, very interesting play there. It's usually an indication of a very high caliber player coming out with a prediction like that, going for the Incineroar switch in that does now switch in. So if the Max Quake goes into the opposing Thundurus slot, then you would be able to KO the opposing Incineroar. But maybe a turn too late at this point. You weren't able to get that special defense boost, so that the Rotom is going to still do some very nice damage. Not to this Zacian this turn. It is going to be protecting itself. Overheat in the Sun would have knocked out that Zacian for sure, but Rotom also protecting itself here in case any of the rock falls that could have been coming out, that is going to be coming out from this Groudon, were to hit into it. That would have been able to pick up the knockout, most likely onto the Rotom, but actually it did less than 25% of the HP, so the Intimidate's coming in pretty clutch there to be able to reduce that damage output. And now the Sandstorm is going to be set as well. That's also going to act as a way of reducing the overheat damage on the Zacian. It probably will be able to survive that attack.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, the Zacian is definitely going to be able to survive a hit here, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the game plan is now for Heriberto. On the one hand, I feel like Usually you want to maintain your Incineroar against a team like this, but I feel like Parting Shot makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you lose the Incineroar, you're kind of okay with that. You just want to make sure you get your free switch into the Thundurus, because it's kind of the only Dynamax candidate left at this point. Incineroar is very hurt. Rotom is pretty hurt. You really want to make sure that you get into a position where you can take advantage of Dynamax with that Thundurus. So that's going to be what Heriberto tries to play for here. We'll see if Vincent finds a way around that. It's going to be tough. Sacred Sword will remove the Incin, though, so that's one step in the right direction.
Yeah, you got to start taking the knockouts on the opposing Pokemon for sure. And the Incin is going to be dropped here, and not an Overheat coming up from the Rotom, opting for the accuracy and the consistency of the Thunderbolt. Doing a nice bit of chip damage to the opposing Zacian. And Rockfall is going to follow up from the Groudon into that Rotom, and is going to be able to do a very, very nice chunk of damage, but still not a knockout. And now the reveal of the safety goggles with the Sandstorm up as well means that that Rotom is sticking around.
It is going to stick around there. Interestingly enough, I would assume it was a roll for sure, but I think that damage roll from Thunderbolt means that Overheat may have actually KO'd the Zacian. That looks to me like it is a very, very offensive, not very bulky Zacian, but still, the opt for the consistency there with the Rotom play, I do like that a lot, especially if you're not assuming that you're going to pick up. Now, though, we have no more Dynamax on the field for Vincent, and this is where Thundurus is going to go big and try to send Vincent packing. May well be able to pick up the Groudon from this HP.
Yeah, it's taken over half damage at this point. We are going to see the Dynamax coming out from Heriberto and get that Thundurus going most likely. Yeah, it was interesting to see no Overheats. It would have done a lot of damage to that opposing Zacian. And now you may not be afforded the opportunity to go for that Overheat, because Thundurus is going to be able to Airstream, but the Zacian is going to still outspeed at least for this turn, and it could be able to pick up the knockout on that opposing Rotom. But no, it seems like the Behemoth Blade is hitting into that opposing Thundurus. That will allow that Rotom Heats to go for another attack. With the previous Intimidate that was hit onto the opposing Zacian, that Thundurus is definitely going to be able to survive the Behemoth Blade. We'll have to see if the where the attack's going to be going into. Unfortunately, it's a little bit laggy here for this at the moment. But Thundurus still is on the field. That much was going to be certain there. The speeds did rise, and a Groudon is disappearing, so I would assume that would be an Airstream into that opposing Groudon. And Overheat is the move of choice this time from the Rotom, and that is definitely going to be able to pick up a knockout onto the opposing Zacian. And now it seems like Heriberto is going to run away with this game.
Yeah, I don't really have that much faith in Grimmsnarl. It's one of the best Pokemon in the format, but maybe not the best at taking on 3 of your opponent's Pokemon in a 1v3, unfortunately for Vincent. I think a lot of this game came down to a couple of turns that really swung the momentum heavily in Heriberto's favor. Oh, actually, it's not the Grimmsnarl, right? The Charizard is still alive. That's an interesting one. Thundurus, though, definitely going to be faster, and should just be able to remove the Charizard from the field, I think. So, regardless, though, I think, really, if a couple of those turns went differently, we could be seeing a different game. So while this game was very one-sided, I don't think that that necessarily means that the rest of the set will be.
No, not at all. Like, the Charizard is most likely the Pokemon you want to be going for the Dynamax. But going for the Dynamax over Groudon that got intimidated twice, maybe not the best use of it. We saw how reduced the damage output was onto that opposing Rotom. Was able to survive the Rockfall through Protect and then a follow-up Rockfall as well. So really, you probably want to be going for the Dynamax on the Charizard if you are able to. But then you've got to contend with that Life Orb Thundurus, which is one of the best checks to the Charizard because it does outspeed and most likely pick up the knockout as well. So maybe leading with the Charizard instead, because you did face down the opposing Rotom, Heat, and Incineroar. Charizard would be fine with that as a start. The Rotom really needs to get a nasty block going before it can do some significant damage to the Charizard, unless it opts to go for the Dynamax to do the Max Lightning, but then you're not Dynamaxing the Thundurus. So maybe switching up Charizard's lead could be absolutely fine as well. You can always switch out your Grimmsnarl into the Groudon to set the sun, so you can do that massive damage. And even with the resistance, Charizard has the potential to just knock out a Rotom Heat when it does not go for the Dynamax, even with the resistance. So going for the Groudon that got reduced attack from the Intimidates, maybe not the best use of the Dynamax there.
This is also one of those situations where when you have something like a Thundurus, it's so oppressive for the team that Vincent is running in preview. On the one hand, there are a lot of checks to that Thundurus. You have things like the Groudon, you have things like screens with that Grimmsnarl, which will prevent it from dishing out insane amounts of damage. But you really have to kind of play a bit of a lottery with the lead, and we're going to see that take effect here as we see Thundurus leading into the Charizard. That's an extremely good lead once again for Heriberto. And this kind of a matchup, when you have to play these sort of team preview mind games, it can really be difficult for the newer players to really play to the best of their ability. A lot of newer players will start to overthink if they're playing against somebody with Heriberto's pedigree. I mean, if you're going up against somebody who's won multiple majors, that's really scary. And it's a bit of an advantage that the sort of favorite can sometimes have, depending on how the teams line up against one another.
Yeah, this is always an interesting turn one as well. The Thunderous does want to click Max Lightning into the opposing Charizard if it does go for the Dynamax, but Groudon is a perfectly good switch into that potential Max Lightning. So then do you go for the Max Airstream to cover for the Max Groudon, which would allow the Charizard to survive that attack and get off its G-Max Wildfire. So always an interesting mind game going into this first turn. Almost certainly going to be a fake out into the opposing Grimmsnarl. You want to stop any of the screens or anything like a Trick Iron Ball that would allow the Charizard to take on that Thunderous a bit better, because it is going for that Dynamax on this first turn, as is the Charizard. And it should be able to take on this Thunderous pretty well, unless the Max Lightning was clicked into there, because there is no Groudon switching. So the choice of the Max move from the Thunderous is going to be very, very crucial going into this first turn.
It's also going to be important to see what the Charizard chooses to do. Max Guard would be a great way to get around that first turn fake out, but this turn one is just so read heavy. We do not see a Max Guard. Is the Zard even going to live to see another day? Well, it's not going to be a Lightning. It's going to be the Max Airstream, opting to go into that Grimmsnarl, being a little bit concerned about a potential Groudon switch-in, and as a result, the Zard is going to be able to fire off at least one pretty big attack. No Sun, though, so it's not going to be able to just one-shot the Thunderous.
But that's still going to do a huge amount of damage, in combination with the Wildfire that will start to add up, and the fact that the Grimmsnarl was able to survive that attack means you get to click something like Reflect or any of the speed control that Grimmsnarl opts to carry as well. So a very, very nice turn coming out here for Vincent. The Charizard not scared of the Max Lightning, just going on the offensive, and not even the Airstream hitting into the Charizard that could have switched into the ground, and opting to double into the Grimmsnarl, trying to get rid of all the shenanigans it can go for, but failing to do so. Going to be very crucial going forward, because that Grimmsnarl can launch off one more Prankster attack.
Yeah, it's days like these you wish you were running Iron Tail on your Thunderous, isn't it? But this time around, this is going to be a really interesting turn as well. We do see Max Guard was clicked by Heriberto, so he is going to essentially lose one Dynamax turn. It's a little bit safe because he's still going to be faster if there's an Airstream from the Charizard, because the Charizard, of course, didn't go for the Airstream last time. But Reflect coming on out is going to be very, very useful. I mean, it's just such a good screen into this team. You've got Thunderous, you've got Zacian, you've got Groudon, and then, of course, you have the Incineroar, which is also a physical attacker when it does click an attacking move. So Reflect is going to pay dividends for Vincent in this game, and it's going to be really interesting to see just what this Charizard is able to do on its last turn of Dynamax as well, because we may well see Sun coming on in.
Yeah, that would be entirely viable for Vincent here. Able to stall out another turn of the Thunderous Dynamax, going for the Max Guard instead to keep it safe. The G-Max Wildfire would have KO'd the Thunderous there. Max Lightning would have almost certainly not been enough onto the opposing Charizard because of that Reflect that was able to be set. Here comes the Groudon, and here comes the Sun as well. So the Charizard is going to be going for a massive attack on this next turn, almost certainly going to survive the Thunderous, and it's going to be able to make the most of its last Dynamax turn. You could potentially go for the G-Max Wildfire once again into the opposing Thunderous, and then follow up with a single target Precipice Blade into the Incineroar that we have seen is not going to be the Shuckle Berry, so not intimidated either, so it's going to be doing a lot of damage.
It's going to be really interesting to see what the rock move is on the Groudon as well. If you have access to something like a Rock Slide, then an Airstream into the Incineroar plus Rock Slide probably just picks up a double KO here as long as you don't miss. I don't really see how either of these Pokemon get removed from the field before those moves go off with the Reflect up, barring crits, obviously. But I think that would be a really great turn here for Vincent. Opts for the Max Guard, though. Doesn't want to risk anything going on down. Airstream going to come on in. That's going into the Groudon. And, well, I don't think Flare Blitz should pick up here, even in the Sun. But, yeah, I mean, just ignoring the Charizard entirely is a very, very good play there by Heriberto. And that's going to be the end of the Dynamaxes on both sides.
Yeah, well, Beans. Yeah, there's the follow-up Flare Blitz. Just ignoring the Charizard completely, incredibly brave. But the Reflect is going to come in clutch there. The Groudon is able to survive that combination of attack. And the rock move of choice is Stone Edge, which is able to pick up the knockout on the opposing Thunderous. So two Max Guards that were not the most useful coming out for both players. At least the Thunderous was able to survive the the Wildfire that was launched off the previous turn. But that was a missed opportunity for the Charizard to get some massive damage for its last turn of Dynamax. If it wasn't Airstream going into the opposing Incineroar, that's still doing a huge amount of damage, even though you can't go for a Rock Slide because of Stone Edge as your move of choice. You could still gone for a lot more damage on that turn with the Charizard. You didn't get a speed boost at all, so that Zacian now coming in, joining the field, is going to be able to outspeed both the Pokemon and put on a lot of pressure.
Even discounting the damage that the Charizard could have done, if it at least got an Airstream boost off of that last turn, it would have been just a massive threat here. You're in the sun with Solar Power. Just clicking Heat Wave is going to be really scary because you're faster than the opposing Zacian, but not having that speed boost is going to be really, really pivotal here. And Vincent's going to find it a little bit difficult, I think, to navigate this endgame, despite what looked like a pretty good start.
Yeah, you still have the Reflect up, so you're still going to be taking reduced damage. The Groudon's taking a reasonable amount of chip, though. It's almost certainly still going to be in range of a Behemoth Blade that would go into it. But that looks like a Flare Blitz that is hitting into a Charizard. But Blast Burn is going to be launching into a Protect of a Zacian. So the Precipice Blade is going to follow up into the opposing Incineroar, is able to connect with the Incineroar as well. And yeah, that was that Airstream boost, allowing the Incineroar, looks like, to able to outspeed both of the opposing Pokemon. Did get some extra damage into that Charizard with the Flare Blitz. The Wildfire is going to do a little bit of damage to the opposing Zacian, but now both Pokemon on Vincent's side are in the yellow, so potentially going to be in range of the attacks coming up from the Zacian.
This is going to be very interesting, because on the one hand, the Zacian should be able to pick up the Charizard here, but both of these Pokemon may well be able to one-hit KO the Zacian from where it is once you factor in the Wildfire damage that it's already taken. I think a lot of the questions are going to be which Groudon's faster. If Heriberto's Groudon is faster, then there's a good chance that neither of Vincent's Pokemon even get to attack here. But if Vincent goes first and manages to remove the Zacian, all of a sudden the endgame comes down to a 1v1, which is going to be very, very interesting. So the Zacian clicking Behemoth Blade, going on in. Is it going to remove the Charizard? No, it's actually going into the Groudon. So it looks like it very well may be that 1v1 in the end.
Yeah, almost certainly going to be. If the Blast Burn hits into the Zacian, that's easily going to be able to pick up the knockout, but then you are going to be stuck for the next turn. If you are even able to survive any of the rock moves that could be coming out from the Groudon from Heriberto's side, that is almost certainly going to be going for. And Rock Tomb is the move of choice. The most accurate of the rock moves is going to connect with the Charizard and pick up that knockout. And yes, we are going to go down to that 1v1. Are you taking care of the Charizard and the Groudon on Vincent's side of the field? It's got to be the Zacian to be able to come back into this game. If it's Incineroar, or maybe even the Gastron could probably do it as well. But if it is Incineroar, then the Groudon should be able to take that game.
Yeah, this is going to be... I mean, the other interesting thing, right? Oh, it looks like it was a Zacian that did go for a Behemoth Blade, and it looks like it survived the follow-up because of Reflect. It survived the single-target Precipice Blades. I think this is enough.
Yeah, well, it did a huge amount, clearly did a huge amount of damage initially, and in comes the second Behemoth Blade that is able to pick up the knockout on the ground. So, wow, a very well-trained Zacian coming out at the end there for Vincent, and it's going to take it into a Game 3.
Oh my, that was, I like to think that was a deliberate, dramatic lag, because we had a big question of, like, what even is the Pokemon? And then suddenly we just see an almost dead Zacian taking that hit and managing to bring it back. So we are going to be going into a game number 3. Really interesting game there. I think Vincent really stepped it up there. I think game 1, he really struggled to sort of keep up. Had a couple of those turns that went very not well for him. But this game, showing that he can hang with some of the top players on the opposition side. And it's going to be interesting to see what the adaptation is. Because on paper, I feel like the lead that Heriberto had there was pretty favorable for turn 1. If a little bit mind-gamey, you know, we always have to think about the potential of Zard switching into a Groudon for Max Lightning bait, stuff like that. But still, it's a pretty good lead overall, and Vincent managed to navigate it to an eventual win, so very well done by him.
Yeah, people do often tend to put Thundurus on their team for one of the main reasons of taking on opposing Charizards. So,
yep.
The awkward thing is, like you said, the Groudon is almost certainly waiting in the back at some point, and then you have to be incredibly brave to click the Max Lightning into the Charizard. But it turns out you don't need to be this game if you are still leading with the Thundurus, because the Groudon is already on the field head with the Charizard. So going to want to get that solar power going immediately, but that allows that Thundurus the potential of going for any of the electric type attacks into this Charizard pretty safely.
Yeah, this is a weird lead for Vincent. It's an unfortunate lead. You don't want to see Thundy Incin when you lead this, so I think he was definitely expecting an adaptation out of Heriberto, and this is going to be a difficult one to navigate. On the one hand, you can max the Groudon, but it's already intimidated, which isn't fantastic. On the other hand, you can max the Charizard, but are you really going to survive a Thunderous Max Lightning if that's what he goes for? Spoiler, the answer I'm pretty sure is no, unless he's running Wakan, which... that would be cool. That would be very cool. I don't think we've seen a lot of Chardyberry. I don't think we've seen a lot of Wakanberry yet out of the Rinia Sun teams, but I don't think we're likely to see that.
Yeah, not particularly, but it's not unseen. I have seen a few occasionally, and it would be amazing into 2 electric Pokemon in the Thunderous and the Rotom as well. But yeah, leading with the Groudon, if you don't have that Gastrodon waiting in the back, that is a reasonably safe Max Lightning into the opposing Charizard. Even if it goes for a Protect, that's still doing a massive amount of damage. If it goes for a Max Guard, that means you're not going for a Max Rockpool with the Groudon, which you may well be doing, because that seems like a Dynamax Groudon to me. So the Charizard not going to be the Pokemon choice here. It goes for Dynamax. It is going to be protecting itself, as the Thunderous did opt to Dynamax as well. So going for the Max Airstream here, not the Max Lightning, into the opposing Charizard, still going to be able to do a nice chunk of damage through that Protect. Get that speed boost onto the opposing Incineroar. We did see it outsped previously in that game too as well, with 1 Airstream boost, so there's no fake out as well. Parting Shot going to be able to hit into that Groudon, so going to be able to reduce the damage output. We saw how effective that was in that game 1, effectively nullifying the Dynamax use of the Groudon coming out for Vincent inside the field. Seems to be going to be the same thing here, because not Dynamaxing the Charizard means you are Dynamaxing your physical attacker that can be intimidated in the future as well. At least you're going for a Rock Ball that's still going to be doing a nice chunk of damage. Even if it hits into the Rotom Heat that did switch in, that's still going to do a nice chunk of damage, and you'll be able to hit the Thunderous for some good damage, as well as set the Sandstorm, which is going to reduce the damage output of your Charizard as well. And the Rock Ball, it did seem like it hit into that Thunderous to bring it down to half HP.
It looks like it will actually do just enough to potentially pick up a 2-hit KO. It might be a roll into that Thunderous, but we have to worry about another potential switch-in of the Incineroar for yet another Intimidate. Overall, great turn 1 by Heriberto. Games really just not respecting the possibility of Max Flare into the Thunderous, and both games did okay. Like, he did get Max Flared last time, but it was not in the sun, and this time, again, just not respecting it. And getting a 2-hit KO, wow, like, even with that damage that was dealt through Protect, that's enough to allow Airstream to pick up the Charizard on turn 2. Really, really good knowledge of the calcs there by Heriberto to take maximum advantage of Vincent's turn 1 play.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can take advantage of the speed boost with this Nasty Plot boost as well, so your Rotom is going to be all set up here. Probably needs another Airstream boost to outspeed the opposing Zacian that could be waiting in the back. Max Rockfall, if it's hitting into that Thunderous, which it does seem to be, will take it out in combination with the Sandstorm damage, but now you've got a boosted Rotom that's going to be able to do a very, very nice chunk of damage to Vincent's side of the field.
This Rotom is... For a Pokemon that is essentially written off by the majority of the meta right now, Rotom is very scary. I mean, if you give it a Nasty Plot boost and also an Airstream boost, that thing is going to be really, really scary. And I think a lot of people look at Rotom and they think, well, I mean, the amount of setup that it needs is it's not worth it. But really, Heriberto is putting it on the field next to bigger threats. So it doesn't need the redirect of a Follow Me or something. It has the implicit redirect of being sat next to a Dynamax Thunderous that the opponent wants to remove more. And that's just been enough for this Rotom to get up Nasty Plots in both of the games that we've seen it. And now it has the opportunity to just start clicking these very strong boosted moves into whatever it feels like.
Yeah, and so it's going to be an Incineroar during the field for both players here as well. We haven't seen the Incineroar yet for Vincent's side of the field. Almost certainly leaving that for Grimmsnarl on the bench this time, because you would assume that the Zacian would be waiting in the back. But we'll have to see who's going to be faster between the opposing Incineroars. It seems like Vincent is going for the fake outs first before the fake outs that could have been coming out from Heriberto's side. And given the position that Incineroar is facing, I'm going to assume that's hitting into the Rotom, because it does seem to be facing forward. And if the Incineroar on Heriberto's side did try to fake out the opposing Incineroar, then that is not going to work. This time the Rotom would be flinching if that was the target, and that would allow a Max Rockfall into the opposing Rotom, or even a Max Quake into the Incineroar to be able to do some very good damage.
I think it was a Max Quake. We heard a boost, so I feel like that would be Quake. So
yeah,
probably
into
the
there would be, yes.
Yeah. So it looks like the Incin was I think it probably parting shotted out. It could have been crit, but I'm gonna assume that it was parting shotted out. This is an interesting one. We get to play a bit of a game. We get to try to figure out what's going on.
Yeah,
Um,
this is like solving the riddle, effectively.
yeah, exactly. Actually, wait.
It's quite an interesting one. Oh, there was something.
We
That
do
was
know that it was not a crit that knocked out the ensign because that had a sash. So we did get a parting shot that went off into the presumable Groudon at some point.
Oh, but that was the
Um.
sandstorm. So maybe it got crit and then the sandstorm would have taken it.
Oh, true. I don't know, but I assume it would have parting shot it out, unless it faked out the other ensign.
It
Like,
depends. Like
mm,
with focus sash, you tend to run max speed on your Incineroar quite often. You don't have to. You can run Vulcans, just make use of the focus sash, but you can absolutely get away with running max speed on the Incineroar. Maybe both players opted to do that, and if you are running max speed, assumedly with a focus sash, you'll feel reasonably confident faking out an opposing Incineroar. But then if they're max speed as well, then they would just hit into you and win the speed tie and put a stop to the Rotoms. So. Yeah, this is an interesting one for sure. It seems like there are technical difficulties for the game three at the end, which is unfortunate.
mm.
But uh, it did seem like the Groudon was still not in the greatest of positions, unless it did get that crit into the Incineroar.
Yeah, that changes
Then
things a little bit.
yeah, because it was at -2 at that point, maybe even -3 if it took parting shot initially.
Yes.
So
I feel like the Rotom, especially the Rotom, puts Heriberto in such a good position there at that point because you've got the opposing Zacian that really can't remove the Rotom super comfortably. Like, you have Sacred Sword, like that's an option, but there's still that Incineroar to intimidate. And generally speaking, once you get intimidated back down to neutral, Sacred Sword is going to be a 3-hit KO into the most common Rotoms. Or at least it used to be when Rotom was a Pokemon that people ran back in Series 10. I remember doing a lot of calcs for Sacred Sword stuff in Series 10. But I feel like Heriberto looked in a very, very good spot. I'm sure we'll get some information soon as to what actually ended up happening at the end of that game. But overall, pretty interesting matchup. I'm glad we got to see what we did get to see from it. It was a well played set from both.
yeah, absolutely was. And it's nice to see the Rotom Heat actually putting in some work. Like you said previously, the Rotom Heat has effectively been written off as a Pokemon. So it's still able to come back pretty well. Okay, we're just getting the information on the match.
So it
So
sounds like the
yeah,
Ensign got crit, and Vincent won the game from there.
okay, okay.
Okay.
So it must have
Okay.
been a loss of a fake out speed tie then,
Yeah.
coming out for the Incineroar if the Groudon was able to KO it, and then yeah, so I guess Vincent was going to take the game then. So
Well
if
done.
that
Congratulations. That's a
if that
really
is the
good
case,
upset.
yeah.
That's a great win for him.
Absolutely, and that's going to further Luxembourg as well. They've already taken down Finland. If they win this round, they will advance to the next round, even without
That's so
a set
sick.
three. So, yeah, that's an interesting finish, and we do apologise for the unfortunate end to that game, as in from the stream side, we don't get to feature that. But that does seem to be the result, and we are going to assume that Vincent did take that game three and advance one more win for Luxembourg. So apologies from our end, but we will be back very shortly with a game that hopefully will be able to be shown with no issues at all. So please stay tuned.